Subaru Natsuki is the most insufferable protagonist in all of isekai. He's incredibly annoying, unwarrantedly arrogant, entitled to no end, and someone you will get some of the worst, most cringe-worthy secondhand embarrassments of your life watching. Yet at the same time, one that just can't be beat. Subaru is this double-edged sword of, God, I hate watching you, please just stop, to, he's the GOAT, no one does it like him! From hate to simping in the span of a couple seasons. We as viewers go through a very similar perspective evolution of Subaru as Emilia does. Ever since the latter half of Arc 3, the Subaru stocks just keep going up. And I think what ReZero does best, showing the truly unfiltered, detestable side of Subaru first, presenting the viewers with a large chunk of time where the protagonist is just not someone you typically want as a protagonist, a character every editor would yell at you for creating because of how unlikable they are, especially in the beginning, is in fact ReZero's greatest win, because that makes Subaru more human than anyone. And while obviously not at the beginning of most of the future characters' arcs, Tape continues to explore this depth in every soul he crafts. Take Julius, for example, specifically from the newest season. Oh, speaking of, this is gonna have some major spoilers up to Season 4, Episode 11, just so you know. Julius Euclius, a man who can be defined with one word in Season 4. Lost. Julius was a proud knight, perhaps the one with the most respect for that title in the world, or at least a man of such high status in his knighthood that it was his duty to punish Subaru for his denouncement of the royal knights, even though, which we later figure out during Season 4, Julius was moved by Subaru that day. And yet, because of the burden on his shoulders, his position as finest of knights, he was forced into a box to crush the very thing which had touched him so deeply. Even still though, he's undoubtedly proud of his position and what it means to achieve the right to call yourself one. Yet then came Season 3's cliffhanger, revealing the peaks of knighthood Julius Euclius had worked so hard to reach. To spend his entire life reaching was in fact all but forgotten in a matter of moments. His entire life's purpose had been a lie. No proof that he ever meant anything to anyone. Even the bond with his spirits, the very thing that made him so powerful as a spirit knight, was diminished. Now the man had no proof of his entire existence nor the lives he affected, or so he thought. Subaru Natsuki, with his anomaly of a body, was not affected by gluttony. The sole proof of the days he'd lived was in the very snot-nosed brat he'd, for one, denounced, for two, had earned the ire of, and for three, had come to understand very deeply as a friend, and vice versa. On top of that, Subaru had discerned Anastasia was a fake before anyone else. In fact, he was the only one to do so. After Julius overheard them talking, he was struck with a painful realization. Subaru recognized Anastasia wasn't actually herself, but her very knight, the one who'd been serving her for years, could not. And even worse, he took pity on Julius and decided to not tell him to save his feelings. Even more so, to see the knightly resolve he thought he prided himself on so easily thwarted. Not just mind-wise with his failing to recognize his own mistress, but also body-wise. A major pivotal moment in Julius's stay at the tower was his battle against Raid. As a parallel to his punishment towards Subaru, Julius was put in the exact same boat, just in Subaru's position this time. Nobody knew who Subaru was at the commencement of the royal selection. Nobody knows who Julius is now, and he probably sees himself reflected in his past self's eyes. Raid was fighting Julius with chopsticks, a far more extreme handicap than the one he gave Subaru. And when the finest of knight swordsmanship did not work, Raid mocked him for it. He mocked him for the very thing he dedicated the 22 years he spent on this earth honing. He was utterly overwhelmed with ease, yet even when he knew he was going to lose, he still pushed forward, perhaps in anger or frustration at his own weakness. Which is honestly something I really want to highlight here. It's such a real emotion. I can't count how many times something has got me so worked up that my adrenaline takes over and I say things I regret. Once you get so emotionally pulled by something, it's difficult to take a breather and reconvene with yourself unless you're able to unleash all those bubbling thoughts in one way or another. In fact, he didn't accept that defeat. Even knowing who he was, Raid Astrea, for God's sake, it was fully understandable he wouldn't be able to win against a monster like that. He tried again before he was even fully healed, and he had to be bailed out by Subaru before he was defeated once more. Then, afterwards, while being carried down the stairs, Subaru dropped a bombshell on Julius. Emilia had passed Raid's trial. Emilia, who wasn't even a knight, Emilia who was far weaker than Julius. And that was followed up with Subaru attempting to comfort Julius, so he didn't feel bad about losing. But that pity-filled sentence pushed him over the edge. Julius, now experiencing a side of Subaru he never had, and even worse, it was pity, pushed him even further away from recollecting and reconvening with his past self. So he threw himself off of Subaru as an act of prideful independence. But Subaru didn't accept his stubbornness and helped him along the way anyway, expressing his obvious sympathies. After that, we got the scene of Subaru lashing out in the castle, but from Julius's perspective this time, where he expressed how moved he was by Subaru's unfair ramblings that day, reaffirming his friendship with Subaru and also introducing a new side of Julius: admiration towards Subaru. Cut to amnesiac Subaru, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, Julius's grounding method, his coping mechanism, had disappeared, throwing his mind into utter turmoil. His, whom I think at this point we can call best friend, as well as any proof of his previous life to latch onto, was gone. We, nor the residents of ReZero's universe, had ever seen this aspect of Gluttony's powers, that being retaining your own consciousness and memories while everyone else forgets your existence. With that said, being the first case must be all the more bewildering and mind-bending, and would undoubtedly make you question your own reality. Again, this whole character arc, which I'm sure will evolve even further in Cour 2, goes to show Tape-sensei's complete mastery at weaving so many different threads into these characters' individual stories. You're shown one side of a character, in this case Julius. In your mind, you have this character complete and boxed in with a nice bow, and then their life gets turned upside down and we get to see just how extensive, deep, and profound their personalities can get, breaking free of our preconceived mold we'd automatically created for them. Any major changes alter the trajectory of their lives, and every action in this universe ripples like a butterfly effect, forcing that very same chain reaction in every other character, making ReZero's world feel that much more dynamic and alive. The same thing can be said for Felix, or Ferris. Up to the end of Season 1, it seemed like Tape just included Ferris to be the trap or the femboy of the series. Oh, and he's also got the kimono mimi ears, tail, and speech pattern, the whole package. It seemed like this almost mascot character was created as a box to be checked at first. He kind of felt out of place. And then we started Season 2 off with the aftermath of the Battle of the White Whale, and like Julius, Ferris was lost. The usual silly, playful, and ear-biting catboy was never the same after Krush lost her memories. We see him try to keep his composure in front of Krush at first, with him even masking how it's like he's seeing a whole new side of her, implying it won't be so bad, only for that playful mask to easily shatter once Ferris puts the blame for everything on Emilia without batting an eye. He's clearly not thinking straight, and Subaru and Krush both correct him for placing the blame on the wrong party, yet he still continued to attempt to reach the conclusion of disbanding their alliance, but was quickly shot down again before Krush announced she's thankful for Ferris' concern, yet she loathes the thought of going on with her life in ignorance, causing Ferris to completely break down in tears. What I love so much about this scene is that Ferris' thought process is palpable. The one who was the very closest with him in the entire world doesn't even remember him. She doesn't remember anyone. Any previous memories are all erased. And as we saw with Subaru when he lost his memories, any skills with the sword she once had are now gone. Aside from her divine wind reading, she was now as helpless as any other civilian, so Felix understandably desired to simply protect and cuddle her in any way he could, even if that meant, in his unclear mental state, disbanding their alliance, or, intentionally or not, ruining relationships between the camps. He was being overprotective and even dipped into the territory of being controlling, with him not allowing Krush to make her own choices. Of course, Felix here is just scared, but this is that human nature I was talking about earlier rearing its head again. Ferris selfishly completely disregarded Emilia's feelings and coldly stated the truth of the witch cult's involvement being tied directly to Emilia's entering the royal selection, only to immediately admit his fault after being called out. And then he broke down because of how jumbled, disoriented, and just generally all over the place place he was. Like I said though, after this day, Ferris isn't ever quite the same. He still puts up the happy and confident mask, but for example, once Krush gets infected with the dragon blood in season 3, that persona is quickly, understandably shattered. On top of his iconic, quirky speech pattern disappearing once things get serious, we see just how frail and fickle Felix can be once things go awry. For a knight, he's surprisingly emotional and can't help but let out his tears in frustration. Even at the end of season 3, Felix's unfair impulsiveness is once again shown, where he decides to speak out, Wilhelm calmed him down, and he admitted his fault. At this point, it feels like Tappe-sensei ruined the tropey catboy's life just to show the juxtaposition between his playful side and his emotionally reactive side. And then there's Rom, who has skyrocketed to being one of my favorite characters in the whole show thanks to the newest season. The pink-haired girl had already started with lots of depth in the characterization department and having a distinct personality from her identical twin, with her being the more abrupt, playfully teasing and satirical of the two. And after the Mobbeast Forest incidents, Rom began warming up to Subaru upon witnessing his heroics and willingness to save her sister. So at this point, you may think Rom to be fully trusting in Subaru, but Arc 6 came around and turned those preconceived notions on their head. To us viewers, her actions in ReZero's latest arc seem straight up appalling, and I've even seen many people note Rom's actions in Arc 6 to be unforgivable. After all, we've seen so much of what Subaru has gone through. We've seen his entire journey up to this point. To even get the chance to stand here in this tower, Subaru's gone through an absorbent amount of deaths and suffering alongside them, just to make sure those closest to him, Rom included, can survive, all the while being a genuinely great friend to those in and out of their camp. Only for him to not be met with comfort and sympathy for also forgetting Rem, but instead with a violent shove to the wall and distrusting scream to his face. When they were dragged to Pleiades' basement, Subaru was simply being pragmatic and grabbing hold of someone. It just happened to be Rom, though he earned her ire for not reaching for Rem, the whole reason they were here in the first place, even though it would be impossible for him to do so. She was inside of the carriage after all. Rom was being unfair. She even accused Subaru of not caring for Rem at all. While this was mostly the miasma speaking, it's still heartbreaking to see this entire scene play out and think this deathly murder-filled event could possibly be spurred on by real thoughts the basal ganglia failed to filter. Not to mention during his lowest point, where Subaru was full on having a mental breakdown-induced panic attack, would she coldly and callously repeat the words she'd said to Subaru in her miasma-riddled state? "I feel bad for Rem." That does seem pretty bad. But how much of Subaru's highs and lows, for that matter, has Rom actually been there for? While she was almost non-existent during Arc 3, she likely heard of Subaru's exploits from the rest of the party. And when Arc 4 came along, Rom's trust in Subaru was put on full display as someone you can undoubtedly count on in a pinch. As a parallel to Arc 3, she was also left out of Arc 5, with her only having to rely on hearsay of Subaru's exploits. Out of the 5 arcs before the current one, Rom was only a major player in 2 of them, Arc 2 and 4. Rom didn't hear Subaru's heartfelt, tear-inducing speech in Arc 5, a huge turning point in people's perception of Emilia's Knight, but that was still a small military group in comparison to this densely populated city. His words echoed throughout the ears of Priestella's probably at least 100,000 populace, and thoroughly moved them due to his transparency and vulnerability. Yet Rom was nowhere to be seen for either of these major milestones in Subaru's evolution. Plus, that white whale subjugation showed Subaru's battle prowess and confidence, but for all Rom knows, he could have been doing that for some other ulterior motive. On top of that, it's even more difficult to believe that Subaru and Emilia alone took down Regulus, one of the Sin Archbishops of the Witch Cult. Honestly, I bet to Rom, Subaru seems quite hard to fully trust. Is he hiding some kind of secret power? How does he always have such great timing? How does he go toe-to-toe with Sin Archbishops and great mobbies like the White Whale, all the while having no magic gate? I'm surprised more people aren't as cautious about Subaru as Rom is. While they were en route to Pleiades after Subaru had his first death there, all of a sudden Subaru ordered Rom to make a nonsensical change in their course. And to this, Rom glared at Subaru, and even pushed back against Emilia, spouting, "Barusu speaks nonsense and falsehoods on a daily basis," before Emilia explained again how he'd never say something silly for no reason like this when they were in danger. And it makes total sense. Why should they change course? Just because Subaru says so? What does he know that they don't? But this is what I love. Humans, you know, me and you in the real world, have more layers than an onion. And that's what I think Tappe has truly tapped into with ReZero. No one feels flat, linear, or predictable. We are complex creatures, animals that make hypocritical choices, are quick to act on emotion rather than logic. And negative feelings don't just disappear after someone does something positive. The negative memories and residual thoughts tend to linger far longer than the positives, in fact. What I'm saying is we don't do things that always make sense, or at least seem like they make sense. It's very difficult for us to pick a set of rules and always stick to them. Some are better at it than others, but humans are more fickle than not because of how complicated our brain chemistry is. One tiny chemical ripple can alter your entire mood, memory, or perception. For example, Rom's callousness goes hand in hand with her lacking a horn. It's described that this disability causes her chronic agony and fatigue. And pair that with the fact that Rom's last connection to her sister was now missing. Like Julius, she must have felt a panging void in her heart once Subaru announced his amnesia. On top of that, everyone's anxiety levels are at critical levels in Pleiades. They are in an unfamiliar location with danger left, right, and center on a time limit, with thousands of lives on the line banking on their success. Different people handle that kind of immense stress in all kinds of different ways. Instead of Julius's method of internalizing, Rom seems to have a far more difficult time bottling those emotions inside of herself. Rather, she projects them onto others in violent ways as a defensive, toxic coping mechanism. Meanwhile, someone like Emilia or Beatrice, who've been there through Subaru's deepest and most visceral moments, are pros at this point. When you think about it like that, Rom's actions coming from profound grief, anxiety-charged knee-jerk reactions rather than pure logic, begin to make a little more sense. This is what Tappe-sensei is doing with every one of his characters. He takes into account every little detail when writing. To further extrapolate, Reinhard, while being the sword saint with cheat powers, is still an awkward mess regarding his complicated relationship with his distant grandfather. Their relationship is a fractured, convoluted maze. Wilhelm, while still stricken with grief shortly after Teresia's passing, irrationally blamed his 5-year-old grandson for his grandmother's death, a sentiment his father would soon parrot as well. Will would then abandon the Estrella household, leaving the child with a deadbeat father and a burden no child should ever have to bear all alone, forcing the boy's trauma to fester deep within his heart, and that guilt would become internalized, never quite able to escape him. Of course, Wilhelm would logically come to regret this, but the damage had been done. That quick, realistic outburst paired with Wilhelm's deep shame and refusal to return to the Estrellas forever shattered the family apart. Now, there wasn't any going back on something so generationally traumatic. In fact, their relationship would only get worse as the story progressed. And that attention to detail creates a realism that echoes and reverberates through every character in the series, not just a select few and the Estrellas. Tappe-sensei boldly exposes the ugly side of his characters because it makes sense to do so. You might think their actions seem out of character or unfair, but how often do you think that way about people in your daily life? Friends, family, strangers, co-workers? Everyone has their off days, everyone says things they regret, and a lot of the time these major mishaps happen because of something completely unrelated, something going on under the hood that's simply invisible on the surface. We as social creatures are so imperfect it's almost laughable. Honestly, I could continue gushing about ReZero's masterclass in characters all day here, but I think I've made my point. They just seem like people to me. And that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you are curious, I am going to be doing the true timeline of ReZero for Season 4, but only once Season 4 fully finishes. And if you don't know what that is, I have a video series on this channel where I basically go through ReZero, but through the perspective of everyone else looking in on Subaru, which I guess doubles as a recap for what events stuck, because I obviously don't have to cover his deaths. So check that out right here if you'd be interested in that. Anyway, I guess that's just about it for me today. So with that being said, like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment any thoughts you have on ReZero's characters in the comments below. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and don't forget to stay trash. Peace. Underwater.